So today I specifically want to focus on energy balance. So we've spoken about this in a few other videos, but I think it's important to start with energy balance, as that is where our starting point would be, and then from there we work it and break it down into more specific nuggets like your macronutrients, micronutrients, and so forth. But it's really important to start with calories specifically, because that is actually where we need to decide what your goal is. Is your goal to gain muscle? Is it to lose fat? Is it to do both at the same time? Is it to maintain your physique, or is it to gain fat, even, whatever the case may be. So it's really important to keep your energy balance in the back of your mind. So when it comes to energy balance, it's actually quite straightforward. And I'm referring to the fact that we are expending energy in the form of calories through a few different processes, which I'll touch on in a moment. And then, of course, we are consuming calories in the form, in the food that we eat, in our, different food groups, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, which I'll also go into a little bit more detail soon. So when we're thinking of energy balance, if we are consuming food in calories that is the same amount of calories that we are expending every day, then we are in an energy balance, and that means that we will maintain our weight. Okay, so if that is your goal, then you need to make sure that you are consuming the same amount of calories in what you are burning per day. If your goal is to lose weight, especially to lose fat, we need to be in a calorie deficit. In other words, we need to be burning more calories than what we are actually consuming. And then, of course, the opposite is true. If you want to gain weight, even if you want to gain muscle specifically, we need to be in a calorie surplus. In other words, more calories need to be consumed than what is actually being burnt. So when it comes to calories being burnt, we can refer to that as our total daily energy expenditure, and that gets actually influenced by a few different processes in the body. The biggest one that makes up about 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure is your basal metabolic rate. So in other words, that's your foundation. That is what your body needs to just survive, to do the basic processes, for your heart to beat, for you to breathe, your eyes to blink, and all of those things. So every single person's basal metabolic rate is different. It really depends on your age. It depends on your genetics. It depends on your body composition, whether you're male or female. Hormones and all of those things actually play a role. So there's many things that we, that actually influence our basal metabolic rate, and we actually don't have as much control over it, unfortunately, as we would want to. So one of the biggest things that we can do to make sure that we are, optimizing our basal metabolic rate, is, of course, to not eat too little. So I know it's a very common thing for us to do if you do want to lose weight, especially fat, and you want to lose it fast. We often then starve ourselves, or we eat very little, and our calorie deficits are very big. But then what happens is, yes, it'll work. You'll lose weight maybe for the first week or two, or maybe even longer. But eventually your basal metabolic rate is going to decrease to match those calories, seeing as your body's kind of in a starvation mode where it's thinking, I'm stranded on an island, I'm not getting food, I need to survive, so let me decrease the basal metabolic rate. And that's actually not what we want to do. So we need to be sure that we are eating in a deficit, but not too big of a deficit. And that's why we actually look at your InBody when we work out the amount of calories we recommend for weight loss or fat loss, if that is your goal. So that's the basal metabolic rate. Another way that we can actually increase our basal metabolic rate, which is a very effective way and it's sustainable in the long term, is to actually build muscle. The more muscle you have in your body, the faster your basal metabolic rate will be. So that's why more masculine, individuals actually have a faster metabolism, and also men often do have a faster metabolism than women, for example, because they naturally have more muscle. So if your goal is to be able to eat more, I definitely urge you to focus on building muscle. Things like your caffeine, green tea, supplements that's been promoted to actually increase your metabolism might have a little bit of an effect, in that short term, but long-term effects are actually not very efficient or effective. So it's not really worth it to really put your money or your time and effort into, into buying those products or really focusing on that. Really, the only thing that you can actually do is to make sure you're eating enough and that you are building muscle. So that's your basal metabolic rate. So 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure comes from that. So it's a massive portion. Then, of course, we also have your thermic effect of food. So digestion and metabolizing food actually also uses up energy. So, and we've seen with protein, metabolism actually also has a higher thermic effect. In other words, it actually takes up more energy to burn protein. I don't know if you've maybe felt it before. If you had like a piece of steak or a high protein meal, you sometimes might feel a little bit hot, and that's often because of the protein digestion happening and causing a bit of heat when it's being metabolized. Quite interesting to see or to feel. Maybe be mindful next time when you eat a protein meal or steak or something that maybe you can sense if you feel a bit more hot than what you felt before you started eating. So that's the thermic effect of food. And then so we can definitely focus on a diet that's rich in protein, because that will also promote muscle building, but then also that burning of energy with metabolism. And then we also have so the cats are going crazy today, sorry. Then we also have our energy expenditure through daily tasks, so non-exercise specific energy expenditure. So like me talking, using my hands, just basic daily tasks, which you actually have a bit of control over. So if you are someone that, has a job where you can walk around a lot, you are maybe having a higher energy expenditure when it comes to non-exercise specific energy expenditure. And you can also maybe focus on that when you are maybe at work, where you can have a standing desk instead of sitting, or you can try to park a little bit further, to walk a little bit further to your office, or whatever you can do to just increase your non-exercise specific energy expenditure. And then of course we have exercise. So exercise also expends a lot of energy, depends on what you do and the intensity and the time. So that is basically what our daily energy expenditure comprises of. So it's your metabolism, or your resting metabolic rate rather, your non-exercise specific energy expenditure, your thermic effect of food, or the metabolism or digestion of food, and then of course exercise. So what we also see with exercise, which is really important, is that with your cardiovascular training compared to weight training or resistance training or strength training, is that strength training actually, like I've mentioned already, promotes the muscle, building of muscle, which then will increase the resting metabolic rate, which will then actually lead to a continuous longer term burn, almost, if you want, compared to doing a cardiovascular training like running for half an hour, which will burn 300 calories and then you're done. So incorporating both cardiovascular training and strength training is really beneficial for especially fat loss and body recomposition. Then if we look at food, that is where our calories, come in. So it's important to also note that not all calories are created equally. So we have our different food groups: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And I'm going to go into detail into each food group in the next few videos. But in general, we see that if we're looking at 1 gram of carbohydrates versus 1 gram of protein versus 1 gram of fat, we see carbohydrates and proteins contain about 4 calories per gram, whereas fat contains 9 calories per gram. So we see that a high fat diet often really shoots up your calories quite quickly. So be mindful of that when you are looking at your diet, that it does really play a role. That little bit of extra olive oil that you add to your cooking or whatever may actually be pushing your calories a little bit too high. So that is why, and on that is why we've developed the eating plans to be in a really well balanced manner, so that you really can get all your nutrients that you need to be healthy, but then also to reach whatever goal you have, so that it really makes it a little bit easier for you to understand or to see how you can build a healthy meal and make sure you are nourishing and feeding your body optimally. So in short, for energy balance, we need to definitely be focusing on both your energy expenditure, but also your energy intake. And we have I would say actually a lot more control over the intake compared to the expenditure. Because if you think about it, your metabolism, the only thing you can really do is build muscle. So yes, that's great, but that's going to take a while. But then of course you also, you have a lot more control over what you eat and what you consume and the amount of calories you actually consume. So, and that's why we also work it out according to your in-body to make sure you are in a deficit if that is your goal, to lose fat, but not too big of a deficit that it decreases your basal metabolic rate. So I hope this makes sense. So it really is important to look at your calorie intake and to not go too low, but not too high, and also depends on what your goal is. And then, like I said, in the next few videos, we'll talk about the macronutrients and how they play a role and how we need to incorporate them into the diet for specific goals. But for now, that's it from me. I'll see you in the next one.